Hello and welcome. I am Chris Hale, Associate Director for Extension with Texas Sea Grant. Thank you all so much for joining us today. You are here. Hopefully, you know why you're here, but because your LOI was encouraged for development and submission as a full proposal. So, congratulations on making it this far in our competition. We are really excited about all of the great ideas we read about in those LOIs, and we're really looking forward to seeing those ideas fully fleshed out in your full proposals. So, I'm here with you today to review our expectations of the full proposal. I know you all sat in an earlier webinar, more on the technical side. This is in terms of integration of research and extension. And I want to provide a space for co-learning today about what extension is, what that means, what integration of research and extension can look like. So that's what this next hour to hour and a half is all about. So our objectives for today are posted here. I'm going to start with a review of some of the terms and the concepts we often use in extension, but I realize that not everyone is as familiar with them. I will also provide some examples of past community engaged and outcome-oriented projects. I'll describe and suggest some things that you, as a principal investigator or a project team member, might want to consider including in your engagement plan as you begin drafting your proposal, and how to work with your Sea Grant extension partner. And finally, like I said, I will leave plenty of time at the end for you to ask questions. Both you can put them in the chat and we can go off mute. We can raise hands and take them verbally as well. And myself and my staff who are online will all do our best to answer those questions. But please hold off on asking those questions until the end. So I mentioned definitions and concepts. I'm going to start, of course, with extension. At this point, you should be very aware that you are applying for a research grant that is centered on extension. The word extension is often conflated with other words like outreach, education, and engagement, which is completely understandable because in order to actually extend or transfer science knowledge or research products, it requires some version of outreach, education, and engagement. But the key here to understanding extension is that there is a transfer of knowledge between researchers and stakeholders. We aren't just doing science for science's sake, right? We aren't just doing science to put it on a shelf and forget about it. With extension, we are focused on not only on co-creating knowledge, but we're focused on knowledge that will be used to inform decisions or change behaviors. So the science we extend will likely have some type of outcome, and we are intentionally aiming for those outcomes with our engagement plans. So this is where we must understand as well what outcome-oriented research means. So this is defined as research that provides quantifiable evidence for short-term, medium-term, and or long-term impacts, specifically in Texas and specifically with community engagement. And so short-term outcomes can look like learning objectives, such as a change in awareness, a change in knowledge, acquisition of new skills, a better understanding of changed motivations. Medium-term outcomes often looks like an action, like a change in behavior, a policy change, or a change in practice or decisions. And long-term outcomes often are realized as social, economic, and environmental consequences. And these are just general descriptions of outcomes, but the point here is that we want our funded researchers to design projects that are oriented toward outcomes. And we want you to measure or document those outcomes too. And we'll have more about what that means a little bit later. But continuing on with our definitions, of course, is outreach. So outreach can take many forms, but in general, we think of it as outward-facing material, and it's typically a one-way effort, meaning I may have information I need to share with you, but I am not necessarily prepared to receive information from you in return. For example, educational Instagram posts about a research result, or flyers announcing an upcoming event, or fact sheets with really digestible science-based news. Outreach is often about disseminating information or distributing information that you perceive your community or stakeholder may want or need. It can also look like staffing a booth at a local event to give out swag or to intercept people as you try to inspire them about your work, or emailing a group with your notes from an important workshop or meeting. Outreach is a really important step in communication, especially if your community is not yet aware of who you are and you need to bring awareness to your project or initiative. It's a necessary part of building relationships, but the relationship cannot last if it is expected to be based purely and solely on one-way communication or one-way outreach. This is where engagement comes into play. So, when fully realized, engagement is a two-way relationship between organizations, institutions of higher education, and external communities for the mutually beneficial exchange of knowledge and resources in a context of partnership and reciprocity. So, engagement means involvement. It means there is a continual give and take of information and action, and everyone engaged clearly understands their role and what is expected, and they give their consent to be engaged. This means you need to contact the people you want to engage with early on, and you should not make assumptions about them and their research or information needs or their potential role in your project. You simply have to ask them first. And this is often where Texas Sea Grant can help. So, who are the people you should engage with? This brings us to our term of end user or stakeholder. You should be engaging with the end users and stakeholders. These are the people who need or will use your research products. They can also be people who are likely to be impacted by your work. They likely will have a lot to contribute to your work given they are invited to the table. Often, these end users and stakeholders are decision makers, policy makers, state or local agencies, local governments, natural resource managers, emergency responders, community action groups, non governmental organizations, business owners. The list goes on and on. It could be a representative of one of these groups of people, or it could be a group of representatives. It could look like a steering committee of a very diverse group of end users. Types of end users varies widely across projects, but your end users should be clearly defined in your proposal. And this proposal development phase is when you should be connecting with your end users and stakeholders. And it's important to note that when you put your proposal package together, it must include letters of support from your end users, from your identified stakeholders, as well as a letter of collaboration from your Sea Grant extension partner and any other outreach partners you name in your proposal as well. So, bringing all those definitions together is this concept of the scale of public participation. So this is the basis of the Sea Grant extension model. Sea Grant's mission is to enhance the practical use and conservation of coastal, marine, and Great Lakes resources to create a sustainable economy and environment. This is accomplished through a network, so a network of people that draws on the expertise of thousands of scientists, community engagement specialists, educators, students, and many others across the nation. And of course, here we're talking about just Texas. Sea Grant uses a three-pronged approach of research, extension, and education to move academic science up the scale of public participation. So that's the image on the left of the screen. That scale of public participation should be moved from informing to consulting, involving, collaborating, and eventually empowering stakeholders. And we do this through two-way communication that allows stakeholders to directly influence decision making. This approach is facilitated by an expansive communications community, which allows Sea Grant to create knowledge to action to meet coastal, stakeholder, and ecosystem needs. So what does this look like in practice? Laura also shared this image in this morning's webinar, but let's dive in a little bit more. On the extension side, coastal communities advise Texas Sea Grant on environmental, economic, social issues that impact their communities. This is actually where our research priorities are generated in all of our biennial research competitions over the years. Texas Sea Grant consults with communities through outreach and education programs to help communities address local challenges. Texas Sea Grant Extension staff engages with researchers to address research priorities. And that research informs scientific communities on applied solutions that work within coastal communities. And on the research side, scientific community informs society on environmental, economic, social issues that impacts coastal environments and communities. Texas Sea Grant funds researchers to validate scientific challenges through scientific discovery. The extension team supports research projects and translates research to inform communities of best practices or solutions. And extension specialists or agents disseminate research by training or assisting coastal communities through various outreach and education approaches. And coastal communities implement or adopt recommended best practices that improve their communities. So again, it's this giving take, this research and extension integration that lies at the heart of the Texas Sea Grant model. So given those concepts and definitions, I want to share just a few brief examples of what successful outcome-oriented and community-engaged research projects look like using those that Texas Sea Grant has supported in the past. So I'm going to share at least one example from each of the three focus areas that we are funding for this current round of RFPs. But again, these are projects that have happened in the past. So that means we're going to talk about healthy coastal ecosystems, resilient communities and economies, and sustainable fisheries and aquaculture examples. So I'll start with healthy coastal ecosystems. I think this one's often the easiest to conceptualize. So in this focus area, in years past, Texas Sea Grant supported the early planning phase of what is now known and trademarked as the Bringing Baffin Back Community Initiative. It began with expressions of concern coming from local citizens in the counties surrounding Baffin Bay. And those counties are listed there: Clayburgh, Kennedy, Jim Wells, parts of Nueces, and Brooks counties. So they were sharing, they came to the researchers that for some time they'd been noticing evidence of declining ecosystem health in Baffin Bay and some of the tributaries that feed that bay. So they were noticing things like harmful algal blooms, some hypoxia and fish kills. There were water quality issues with bacteria and chloride and high nitrogen and chlorophyll. This prompted studies conducted by university researchers back in 2012 with funds from Sea Grant. And the researchers did not do this alone. They didn't undertake these studies alone. They enlisted the help of citizen scientists, those same folks that brought their attention to it. So together, they collected water quality samples and they found that nitrogen was 3 times higher in Baffin Bay compared to other Texas bays. They found some long-term increases in nitrogen and chlorophyll, which are indicators of algal biomass. And ultimately, they showed that nutrient pollution is the key driver of the decline people were witnessing in Baffin Bay water quality. And that's a picture of Dr. Mike Wetz. He's now with Heart Research Institute, and he is the one who's leading this initiative from the water quality science perspective, and some of his partners and stakeholders that collected samples with him. So that early work catalyzed even more funding and support from other sources for the hugely successful Bringing Baffin Back Community Engaged initiative, which carries on today. They were able to set up various committees and subcommittees to tackle different watershed issues, work with local governments and decision makers to implement watershed improvements and plans, and they continue to host stakeholder workshops and meetings that the public is free to engage in. In fact, there's a stakeholder workshop again later this week in the Baffin Bay area. So the next focus area is resilient communities and economies. In this focus area, Texas Sea Grant has been very involved in building resilience to hazards. Specifically, and probably most notably, of course, is in the wake of Hurricane Harvey. Of course, Hurricane Harvey made landfall in the mid-coast in 2017, but its effects rippled out from there, all along the coast. And so while Texas Sea Grant was very much involved in response and recovery in the mid-coast, other communities such as Beaumont and Port Arthur felt these effects, and they wanted to better understand those impacts so they could build resilient strategies and improve their preparedness, particularly within the context of local business disruptions. So Sea Grant helped connect researchers with local stakeholders, helped conduct interviews to quantify and qualify those impacts, and they help develop and distribute information about this project through things like flyers and other media. And so ultimately, this work resulted in development of a best practices handbook. So with our sustainable fisheries and aquaculture focus area, since I think we have Laura Piccirillo on the line, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to her for a moment to explain this project since she's here with us and was very intimately involved. Laura, you want to go ahead and explain this one?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Hey everybody. Happy to have you all on again. And for some of you who weren't able to join us this morning, because I noticed there's more people on this afternoon, just an FYI, that we'll have the recording up within the next day or so. So if anyone missed this morning, you're welcome to the recording for this afternoon. But back to the conversation at hand. So for sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, this is a project that wasn't directly funded by our biennial competition, but it's a long history of the work that Texas Sea Grant has done on its extension components with the shrimp industry for various types of gear and changes. And so because of Texas Sea Grant Extension's relationship with the shrimp industry, we were actually approached by researchers at NOAA who were very interested in continuing to investigate and find some solutions for reducing bycatch in the shrimp fishery. As a net fishery, there's a lot of bycatch associated with that fishery. Um, Texas Sea Grant was very instrumental historically in developing and implementing turtle excluder devices, and NOAA was very interested in trying to explore the same issue, but reducing fish from shrimp catch. Shrimp fishermen are not interested in catching fish. It's extra labor, it's extra time and sorting on their end. From an environmental perspective, it's certainly, there's a need to reduce wasteful catch and try to minimize environmental impacts by not catching non-target species. And so this project came about as a relationship with NOAA, but is very much in that Texas Sea Grant extension model that we're talking about here. And so, we worked with scientists and researchers at NOAA on some potential gear designs and the research there, but we also developed a stakeholder working group made up of shrimp industry members so that they were able to directly provide their input, their knowledge from being on the water, working with the gear and how well that gear may or may not work, to provide input to help streamline those designs and make something effective that might be valuable. So, from the science side, we were looking at, water hydrodynamics, fish behavior, things along those lines that might go into the designs. But on the industry side, they were also thinking about the practicality of whether or not the gear is going to be too heavy or, not, also lose shrimp or other factors that might affect them from a business perspective or from an operational perspective. We are still in the process of this project, but we did come up with 5 different designs, and we are now in the phase of actually cooperatively testing those designs with industry. And so we have industry members that are willing to take a researcher on their boat to test out and compare that gear to their existing gear. And then, after each of these testings and cycles, we also convene the stakeholder working group to review results, talk about possible improvements, and what might move forward so that we can move forward with finding devices that continue to help reduce bycatch in the industry.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Laura. I really appreciate it. Moving on to the next one in this focus area of sustainable fisheries and aquaculture is another really great and recent example. And I think we have Mario online. So Mario, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and helping us understand this project since you are, again, very intimately involved with this effort.
Thank you, Chris. So one of the projects that Texas Sea Grant has really dove into is the Texas cultivated oyster mariculture industry. And obviously it's very new to the Texas coast. It's actually the last state to adopt it. So it really is at its infancy, but it's a burgeoning industry that's growing very quickly, very significantly, where it's actually gotten a lot of interest from both state and federal agencies, even the Office of Aquaculture with NOAA. So some of the projects that we're doing is very workforce oriented and business and marketing oriented, as well as scientifically hard science focused. So some of the projects that we funded before are looking at the genetics, working with AgriLife to really work at on the genetics of the oysters, and disseminating the different genetics of different bays. And we have actually seen that they are extremely significant, and it's really helped with our resource managers, both with Texas Parks and Wildlife, Department of Health, um, a lot of different ones. As well as we've also worked in coordination with a lot of other states. We're actually right now, we just launched a program that isn't directly funded through this RFP, but we're actually looking at certain things that happen in the Gulf of Mexico, for example, sudden oyster mortality events, things like that. But some of the research that we really want to focus on is establishing baselines in this oyster aquaculture industry, looking at genetics, growth, the hydrodynamic models, siting locations, things like that, uh, to really get a better idea of the potential for this industry's growth. Another thing that we're looking at is to really help facilitate industry engagement and really help to understand and develop like entry barriers and environmental challenges that are associated with this industry. So we're working a lot with NGOs, state and federal agencies, cooperating together to look at new gear designs, working with commercial farms, to actually put different oysters in there to see how they'll fare in the industry, looking at growth rates, looking at mortality, other things like that, as well as even the marketing and industry dynamics of the industry, of this oyster industry in Texas. So we really encourage widespread use of the research that'll be done for this industry, because it can really help the end users. That can vary from the end user as the farmer, as well as the restaurant, the server, the Texas citizen that's going to eat the oysters, as well as natural resource users that can really implement and use this information widespread.
Great. Thank you so much, Mario, for that explanation. That was very helpful. I'll move on to our next example from the same focus area. I believe we have Alexis online. Alexis, do you mind going off mute and sharing your knowledge about this effort?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Alexis Sabine, and I work in recreational fisheries. So I'm going to share a little bit about a recreational fisheries project that we conducted called the Coastal Monitor Program. So similar to the Baffin Bay project that Chris described a few minutes ago, this project was developed out of a need to gain a deeper understanding of the processes affecting Texas coastal ecosystems. We aimed to accomplish this through a collaboration with the recreational fishing industry. We know that fishing guides have extensive experience working in coastal waters, and that gives them a unique perspective as well as the ability to recognize changes occurring in the environment around them. However, their expertise is not always sought out in data gathering missions. So we were looking to change this and really amplify local voices. So we assembled a coalition of 12 fishing guides, each with 15 to 35 years of experience fishing the Texas coast. The guides served as coastal monitors, and they reported their qualitative observations of both acute and ongoing processes affecting Texas bays from the lower Laguna Madre up to Galveston. And their input was incorporated throughout the entire project. So at the beginning, we pulled the fishing guides to get feedback on what topics we should ask about, what frequency of observations we should target, what methods they prefer for providing observations, and what we should do with the information that they reported. So they reported observations through online surveys, and we also held a series of virtual and in-person meetings where we shared all the collected information. We discussed further as a group, collected more detail, and ranked and prioritized the issues that the fishing guides identified. They provided extremely valuable insights on the topics listed here on the slide. One notable topic was the effects of Winter Storm Uri on fish and vegetation populations throughout the coast. They also identified key locations that face significant shoreline erosion and even areas where humans can make changes to reduce our environmental impact. So I just wanted to highlight this project as an example of a meaningful collaboration that involves participation from key industry stakeholders and led to greater inclusion of the fishing industry in research and management efforts.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexis. I really appreciate that. That excellent example from the Sustainable Fisheries and Aquaculture focus area. Just a quick reminder to those joining us, please keep your microphones on mute till the end. This is being recorded. All right, so we share these terms and concepts and examples with you in hopes that it helps you build your engagement plan within your proposal. So the next set of slides is really to help refine your understanding and focus in a little bit on what an engagement plan is and what should be involved and how your Sea Grant extension partner can help. So what is expected of a Texas Sea Grant funded engagement plan? Here are some basics. All of these are included in the RFP, but just to highlight them, your engagement plan outlines the planning and execution of integrating research results with broader impacts and outcomes. It should describe the community and stakeholder engagement activities, specifically how knowledge will be transferred to end users and stakeholders. It identifies how the results will be used and by whom. It identifies which end users, stakeholders, or communities will be directly engaged in the project. It clearly explains the likely outcomes and broader societal impacts of the use of the research results. It identifies how your extension plan will help achieve our Texas Sea Grant strategic goals. So remember, you need to link them back to our strategic plan. And it clearly describes how extension activities will be measured. So there's really going to be what we're calling a spectrum of engagement. Different projects are going to have different types of engagement, different types of engagement plans, different types of roles based on the goals of your research and based on the partners involved. And, that is why we're asking you and requiring you to involve an extension partner from Texas Sea Grant. They're going to help you understand what's appropriate, what will work, what won't work for your engagement plan, and also clarify their own capacity and level of effort that they can contribute both to your proposal writing phase and if it's funded later on what they can contribute to the funded project. More about that in a second, but I wanted to highlight the Texas Sea Grant performance metrics and measures. I mentioned the need for measuring those outcomes. So how will your project's extension activities be measured? This is a really important question to ask yourself and definitely something you need to talk to your extension partner about. Texas Sea Grant and every single Sea Grant program across the nation has to report on performance metrics and measures. And wouldn't it be wonderful if it was a mutually benefit when you have metrics that you have to capture for the success of your funded project and the extension partner you team up with also can report out on those successes in our reporting system. So what you're looking at here is just a real short list examples of metrics that Texas Sea Grant normally reports out on. Things like number of resource managers who use ecosystem-based approaches and management activities, number of acres of coastal habitat protected, enhanced, or restored, number of fishers, seafood processors, aquaculture industry personnel, or seafood consumers who modify their practices, number of communities that adopt or implement sustainable economic and environmental development practices and policies, and number of communities that adopt and implement hazard resilience practices. Again, very short list, just an example. There's a lot more different types of performance metrics and measures. I encourage you to talk to your Sea Grant partner about which ones make sense for your project so that, again, there's a benefit to both partners in terms of reporting out on the outcomes of these wonderful projects. So I'd like to definitely clarify the role of extension in your projects, in your proposals, but also for those that get funded. What is the role of extension staff in your proposal? So all engagement plans, as I said, will look different depending on the project. But these listed here are just some of the ways that Texas Sea Grant extension staff might participate in the project. Remember, there's a spectrum of engagement. So each Sea Grant agent and specialist has varying levels of capacity and time and effort that they can contribute both to your proposal drafting process as well as the actual project if it's funded. So it's important that you talk to them now or as soon as possible to explore how best to support each other. So some of the things that you can expect your extension staff to do in support of your proposal. They will support and advise you with outreach, education, or engagement planning. They will review your draft proposal, but make sure you give them plenty of time before you submit. And as you know, you're going to need plenty of time to work with your sponsored research program too. So make sure everyone's aware of the timeline and give your extension staff plenty of time to review your proposal so they can, at the very least, note any red flags or make suggestions or make improvements. Talk to them about how they want to be involved in the proposal draft. They can also help you liaise. They can introduce you to stakeholders in your community of interest, wherever you might be working. If you don't already have those connections, ask them for help in making those connections. If you want, you can have them participate in project advisory panels or committees once that project is funded. Are they already a part of different project advisory panels or committees? Are there committees they're involved in now that you could consider working into your proposal? They will contribute to creation of communications and outreach products and tools. And if so, they can help you work with our internal Texas Sea Grant communications team to share project results through our networks and our social media. Again, if your project gets selected for funding, then you will have the ability to connect with our communications team to circulate information about your project. But again, that needs to be planned ahead in this proposal. And of course, your extension staff is going to be interested in combining any outreach events that they're already doing for other projects with yours. So if there's anything that they're already doing, ask them about it and see if it makes sense to piggyback on stuff that they're already doing so that they're not adding to their workload. What they won't be doing, they will not write your proposal and they will not write your engagement plan for you. They can certainly read it, review it, add comments, but it's the PI's responsibility to write that. They won't commit to doing all of the entire outreach, education, or engagement component. Talk to them about what they are able to do. In some cases, you might have other outreach partners you're already planning to include in your project who will be doing that outreach and education and engagement. But let your Sea Grant Extension partner know who that is, and you can figure out how best to move forward. At the very least, you'll have a Sea Grant Extension agent or specialist on your project in a supervisory or advisory role, and someone else might be doing the outreach and education. But talk to your extension staff to figure that out. They will not be able to receive salary from your budget. So don't include salary for Texas Sea Grant in your budget, but do include travel. They cannot travel if you don't include travel funds for them. So if you have a project that requires everybody meets up in Austin, for example, our agents are not in Austin. They'll need travel support to get there. So that's something to think about in your budget discussions. And they will not commit to paying for other project purchases from our own internal Texas Sea Grant budget. Things like printing, graphic design, translations, etc. That needs to be covered in your budget. So again, think about those communications products and other materials and supplies that you might need in partnership with your Sea Grant agent. So some things to think about. You should be reaching back out to your Texas Sea Grant Extension team member soon if you haven't already. This is the person you identified in your LOI. To confirm your partnership, reach back out to them. In some cases, they might need to connect you with an alternative or additional extension team member if it makes sense for your project. As you set up your conversations and meetings with the extension team, I offer these questions listed here as discussion starters and things to keep in mind as you develop your engagement plan and your proposal. So things to reach out to your Texas Sea Grant point of contact as soon as you can to discuss are what decisions, like policy decisions, management decisions, business decisions, etc., what decisions can be informed by your work? What stakeholders, community members, does your research serve? Who are the expected end users? What role can stakeholders play in the planning, implementation, and evaluation stages of your research? What other outreach or engagement partners do you currently have? What is the geographic scope of your project? Have you included a budget for travel, facilitation, publications, materials, and meetings? Additionally, when it comes to communication, how comfortable are you as a PI or the other co-PIs and project partners? How comfortable are they at communicating your research and your science with stakeholders and the general audiences or general public? What kind of communications products are needed? Do you need them in multiple languages? This will help our extension staff determine what level of support that you're going to need for your project. What types of products and tools could be developed to help stakeholders utilize the results of your research? And just in case you weren't already aware, you should be by now, but just in case, Texas Sea Grant Extension staff identify as either an extension agent or an extension specialist. Here on this slide, you can see all of our agents. So These agents are each assigned to specific coastal counties where they conduct the majority of their extension work. While all their work is focused on marine and coastal issues, their work is supported by both AgriLife and Sea Grant. They bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table, and they can help you connect at the local level on a variety of relevant topics. These are the folks that you hopefully already have listed in your LOI. And if it's not the agents, then it's probably one of these folks, our extension specialists. So some of our staff identifies as specialists, which you can see here. Specialists are not locked to a specific county in terms of where they do their work. They typically have an area of expertise. For example, Magellan has expertise in coastal resilience. Mario, you heard from earlier, he has expertise in aquaculture, Alexis in recreational fisheries, and so on. So they bring their expertise and they apply it to address the goals and objectives of Sea Grant, and they do so in partnership with our extension agents up and down the entire coast. So together, our agents and specialists make up our extension team. In some cases, you might identify or work with only one agent or only one specialist, or perhaps you will involve several of these folks. It really depends on your unique project, and your Sea Grant point of contact will help you determine what you need. You should have been in touch with at least one of these extension staff members by now, or perhaps you reached out to me, or maybe you talked to our director, Laura Picarillo, when you developed your LOI. So these staff members are ready to work with you in developing your proposal. And of course, if it's funded, are really looking forward to working on your projects. So lastly, to continue to help support you in your extension journey, we are going to continue offering office hours. Some of you were really wonderful and showed up to our office hours during our LOI phase. We're going to continue that, but only 3 more sessions are available, noted here on this slide. So Monday afternoons, 3:30 to 5 p.m. on March 24th, March 30th, and April 7th. And if either Mallory or Laura, if you have it handy, maybe we can throw that up in the chat. If not, we'll also be sending it out in an email to all of the PIs. So these office hours are an opportunity for you to connect with the staff and brainstorm your projects. Notably, if you are already in contact with your extension partner, you don't need to come to these office hours. You can set up a time separately with your Sea Grant partner as needed outside of these office hours. This is more for anyone who's not totally sure, needs more access to extension. These are available for you. Also really important to note, if you expect to come to these office hours, you need to register, but you have to do that no later than 3 p.m. on the Friday before the office hour you plan to attend. That means if you plan to attend all 3 office hours, you must register before Friday 3 p.m. for each one. So make sure to mark your calendars now and remind yourself to register. With that, I am going to stop talking for a little while, and I really hope you have some questions or some comments or other things you might want to share. I haven't been paying attention to the chat, so I don't know what's going on there, but if you want to raise your hand or put something in the chat, we can answer your questions to the best of our ability.
I did go ahead and put the registration link in the chat. So the new office hours registration link for the next 3 sessions are up. And
Thank you for doing that, Laura.
Huh?
And yes, slides from this workshop will be made available. Mia has raised her hand. Mia, you have a question?
Just a
Comment.
silly question. So the link that was just provided for the registration of the new office hours, is that the same link that is on our webpage? Do we need to change anything? I guess that's my question.
I just sent it to Nick to have it updated.
Okay, super.
Oh, Mia, since you're available, there's a budget question in the chat. It says, how can I include the travel budget for the extension agent in the proposal budget? Do you want to take a stab at that, Mia?
Well, that would be with you meeting with your extension teammate and determining the scope of work that you're going to be wanting that person to assist you with in helping develop the engagement plan and the actual engagement plan itself that you and your PI research team will be conducting. So, and then determine if travel is needed by the extension partner, where that travel would need to be to and from. You would include that in your travel budget.
Great, thank you.
So it's all included in your travel budget that you detail out. And the NOAA guidelines that's on our webpage gives really good detailed examples of how to detail out your travel budget. So once you have your meetings and decide what travel is needed, then you'll be able to draft together what to include in your travel budget and budget justification.
Great, thanks, Mia. Hopefully that answers your question.
Chris,
Yes,
can I chime in?
yes, please.
I worked on many different research collaboratives with researchers throughout the years. And what really helps is once we start talking about the outreach extension and just all the things that are included in travel, the researchers like, well, okay, we'd like to do something here, here, here. And then what they do is then the Sea Grant agent or specialist will go in and kind of give them a rough travel cost, detailing, looking at, all that car rentals, hotels, per diem, blah, 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 and then just kind of submit a rough estimate on travel costs. And that's really what we found that is the easiest way to just give a kind of cost breakdown of our travel costs. And it really works both ways. It's really easy.
Thank you, Mario. That's very helpful and more detailed response. Thank you again. Yes, and your Sea Grant partner will help you determine that and should give you an estimate. There's another question. If our study area spans multiple counties along the coast, how should we approach Sea Grant specialists for engagement? Should we work with multiple specialists along the coast, or is there a more strategic way to coordinate outreach and collaboration that you suggest, given that their time is so limited? Thank you for recognizing the limits of our time. Yes, I think you should select one specialist at this point to talk with, and that person can help you determine if other folks need to be pulled in strategically, of course. And maybe there's justification for having multiple agents or specialists on your project, or at least they can divide and conquer. Maybe it makes sense to have, for example, we have 2 coastal resilience specialists, one that kind of covers north, one that covers mid and south. Maybe you want to engage both of them on your project. They can attend, the north person can attend certain meetings and the other can go the more southerly route. However it makes sense for your project, but I would recommend making contact with one person on the extension team and have that conversation with them, and they can pull in others as needed. Yeah, and Mario adds extension team can also reach out to different agents if facilities would be needed. Any other questions?
There was a travel question again. Would travel money be withheld from the award at the beginning or given to us in the grant to then pay for the travel directly? So you would have it in your travel budget for your project. And when you're awarded your funds, that will be, it's cost reimbursable. And so you invoice Texas A&M Sponsored Programs Office and they reimburse you for travel. So it would be included in your budget. Nothing's withheld. You're funded on an annual basis. As the extension team member conducts the travel, then depending on where you're located, what institution you are at, you can provide if you're within the A&M College Station system, you can provide the actual grant number. Of course, we'll know what that is, but the grant number and accounts for your project so that we can be reimbursed for our travel.
Thank you, Mia. We have plenty of time, so don't be shy. If you have more questions about extension or about this process, please do send your questions along. I'm not seeing any more raised hands. So I'm going to throw my contact slide back up on the screen one last time in case you all need it or want it. If you're not sure who to talk to about this stuff, or you're not sure about your agent or your specialist or anything, if you have extension related questions, please reach out. I'm here to help. My email address is very easy to remember. It's just my name, chris.hale@tamu.edu. And I look forward to helping you identify the best path forward for extension. Laura, do you have any other closing comments or thoughts to share?
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that and great session. Okay, we did have one quick question come in, so I'll grab that one really quickly before we wrap up. So we have, what type of industry engagement, private sector example, is Texas Sea Grant most looking for? Would it be technology related? That's really project dependent. I think that's a question definitely that I would take some time talking through with your extension partner. We are interested in engaging on all levels, whether that be resource managers, state or federal agencies, from an industry perspective, whether we're talking about harvesters or farmers or communities on the coastal resilience side. Are we talking about residents? Are we talking about city planners, things along those lines? It's so project dependent that I think that's a question to really delve into with your extension partner. Closing remarks. Just a couple of things that I wanted to remind everybody. We are under federal funding, so I wanted to just reiterate. I know there were some questions early on in the LOI about some of the language and some of the executive orders. I just wanted to remind everybody that as you're working through your proposals and writing your proposals, please note that we are federally funded and we are under federal mandates, and we have not received specific NOAA guidance from NOAA on specific language, but the executive order on DEI applies. If you have questions about it, please reach out. I am happy to help navigate and try to better understand or work with you on what you are trying to communicate or work on, and whether or not it may be an issue in any way related to some of the existing EOs. The other EO that I wanted to draw to everybody's attention, because it has actually gotten some attention from a federal funding standpoint, is the EO defining the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. And that is being flagged in documents and some things along those lines. So as a recommendation that EO is in place, that might be language, if you are specifically referring to the Gulf, that you might want to take some attention around. Most agencies have now officially changed that language. So I wanted to draw your attention to that as well. Other than that, as Chris said, we're really excited to see where these proposals go, and we look forward to working with you. And I shared my email this morning as well, so please reach out to us as you have questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. And with that, we'll conclude, and hopefully this recording was pulled off successfully, and I'll be able to download it and share it with you all soon. Have a great afternoon.